Hello and welcome to a new edition of Interview with Irene. Now, today my setting is a little different because I'm filming from Denver, where I am for our conference. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest, the lovely Cathy Jackson. Welcome and thank you so much for coming, Cathy.
Thank you for having me so much.
And um and Cathy is an author of Christian romance, which I started getting into, and I think it's a very good genre in tune with what my beliefs are. So I'm excited to have you on.
Well, thank you very much. It's a genre that I love to write in.
Wonderful. Could we start by talking a little bit about your background and also how you began in that genre?
Sure. Um, I guess we could start at the beginning. In school, I never liked reading, never liked writing, and the classics were usually watched as opposed to read. Yeah, everybody laughs about that. This is not the same. No, it's not the same. So now, even through college, because I have my associate's degree in psychology, but even through college, I wasn't really a paper writer. Didn't really like to do anything like that, and kind of skidded by as much as I possibly could in my classes, my English classes, and even my speech classes. So had a few, met my husband Matt and had a couple of children, and then had two more children. And somewhere along the way in there, a friend of mine invited me to church, and we started going to church. And my husband and I gave our lives to Christ at that point. And I, I honestly have no idea where I would be right now if we hadn't done that. Because about 5 years ago, my mom died, and my faith just really got what got me through her death. And it's almost like a daily walk too. I talk with my hands. so kind of a daily walk too. My husband, of course, and our family, right? That's a huge part of it. And it wasn't very long after her death that uh, I started writing. I really wanted to write, and kind of As You Wish was my first book, and that book came out, and I really wanted to take that grief and that pain and give someone hope, um, who had gone through, is going through that sort of circumstance, and let them know that at the end of it, there's this huge light, but you got to go through this really dark place in order to get to it. So that's kind of where I ended up in the Christian sort of inspirational Christian genre, sort of not, sort of contemporary, because I think my books really skid along that line between those. You can't really call it Christian romance, you can't really call it contemporary romance. It's sort of a blending of those, and that was completely accidental.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I have your lovely book, and I'm looking forward to reading more too. So it's incredible. So basically, we touched on how your faith influences your writing and also how your family influences your writing. Could you tell us a little more about your husband and kids?
Husband and kids, yeah. I met my husband in college.
Oh,
Um, Yeah, I had been about 2 weeks out of high school, and he had been a few months, I guess, out of the Air Force. And we met on the Red Lake College campus in Ina, Illinois, and I just kind of knew he was the one. And we sort of flirted. We'd yell across campus at each other, kind of fun and flirty things and just silly stuff. We were friends for the longest time, and then we dated for a bit and just sort of took a break, and then uh, we ended up getting married. So, like I said, we have four wonderful. I still call them my kids. They're always kids, aren't they? No matter what age your children are, right? Like he will be 23. 23 will be 20, well, he's 20, and then a 17-year-old, and then a 13-year-old. Yeah, that's pretty close. He's like sitting off my side here. I'm like, right. So they're 3 years chronologically apart. So yeah, and they are just so crazy because we'll be sitting at the dinner table and I'll be like, okay, so this is going through my head about this is what I want to write. And then the kids will just go completely off at a completely different thing. Mm-hmm. And they'll be like, you should write this. And oh man, it's so awesome. There's so much like free association at our table. Like we may start off, it's kind of like that game of telestrations, right? If anybody's ever played that, right, you're supposed to draw an igloo. It ends up being like, Buffalo Bill or something. Like, how did you get that? That's most of our conversations at our dinner table. But it makes for a fun conversation because it's like never a dull moment.
Right. That's good. I also like following your Facebook and Twitter posts and notice you and your husband do a lot of Comic-Cons. Could you talk about that? And also, do you ever do cosplay?
Yeah, we do probably about 12-ish a year. My husband's a big Mandalorian. He's got his own Mandalorian Merc 501 approved costume. Mm-hmm. And then I think it was one Halloween 2 years ago. I said, hey, it'd be kind of neat is to be a Jedi along with your Mandalorian. So we went to Walmart and we got this like waffle print bathrobe and a big sheet I think it was from Goodwill. And then we sort of bashed together a Jedi costume for me, which I have in his tote that he keeps, this big rolling tote that he keeps his Mandalorian costume in. So sometimes I do dress up alongside him, but he's got his own kit that he dresses up in.
Nice. Any other hobbies?
Reading. Right now, I used to sew really well, and I could still sew, but for me, it just comes down to time. Like this summer, the kids were home. Jessen is 17, Joseph is 13, and they're kind of getting a little older, and I've hit that point where I realize they're getting older, and so I want to spend a lot of time with them and also do what I love, and then kind of, we're a very creative household. So like my daughter loves to write and the kids are into I don't know, Reddit posts and things like that, and anime and some really cool stuff. So we've got a very eclectic household that we live in. And occasionally it's nice, like this last weekend was the Heroes for Kids Comic-Con. And our three youngest went with us this last weekend, and it was fun. It was fun having them there, and they had a good time.
That's wonderful. Leslie, any advice for future writers?
Any advice? I love what I saw on Brian K. Morris's page, who's a friend of mine. He is so cool. He's like, and I'm going to butcher it badly because I don't remember things really well. But it was like, if you have a rough draft or maybe even idea of starting a story, write it. Write it down, get it out and do that now. And I was in talks with a lady who was talking about getting her first novel written, and it was actually pretty funny. She's like, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "Well, you just write." I know. It's so easy, right? You just write. And she's like, well, what about a book cover or an editor or formatting? And I'm like, well, that all comes later. Because your first draft is going to be that draft that's going to need that polish. It's going to be that lump of coal, you know. But everything starts with that first draft.
Right.
And then once you get to hold the book in your hand that you actually wrote, you know, you actually write, because the wonderful thing about self-publishing is you get to have control over what goes in your book or what doesn't. And so if you want a different bend or a skew on a story that's been out there before, and you want it seen through your eyes by the reader, you can do that. Yeah, and I love that because it allows for so much creativity and so much individuality by the reader. And it's like, some books, maybe even by the writer, that you open the book and you kind of have an idea what may happen or may go on, right? But you want to get to the end of the book because it's a journey, and it's a path that you know the ending to, but you haven't walked before.
Right.
And I love that. It's when I was talking to my oldest son works at the library in our hometown, and one of his coworkers, her name is Priya, and Priya was asking about something today when I was there earlier, and I said, yeah, see, I love writing the story, and I kind of get sad about the last couple of chapters because I knew where the story was going and I wanted to end. But if you're reading a really good book, do you ever really want that book to end?
Oh,
No. And it's the same way writing.
Yeah.
Why do you want the book to end if you're writing? And I'm like, I don't want it to end. I don't want it to end. But it has to, because